All right, and we are in. So, Mike, thanks for swinging by.
Thanks for having me.
How has your 2024 been going so far? It's been up and down for everyone.
For me, it's been going great, just because I'm doing all the things that
Walk me through that. What's the secret to being able to do all the things you've always wanted to do?
really a lot of suffering, I would say. I was in law enforcement for 23 years, and I finally got out of it a year ago, and really is a cult. So I decided I want to do all the things that I want to do, which was act right, do stand-up comedy, and so those are all the things I have time to do now.
Law enforcement for 24 years.
Yes.
That is no joke.
Yeah, you kind of get I wandered into it, and then I got stuck into it, and you're making money, and then you have a family, and you kind of look around at everybody else, and where am I going to make this kind of money? So it gets hard.
Yeah, like hard to leave.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you're the first person I've actually ever talked to who is in law enforcement. I spoke to a couple of people who are in the military, who are posted overseas, but what was it like kind of being law enforcement?
I mean, personally, you have more problems with the people that you work with than the actual criminals, and that's what I had a problem with. And there's so much politics and red tape, and so it's hard for you to do your job. And so you go into it. I really did go into it thinking I'm going to help people. This will be great, and it never happened.
Really, it never came to fruition like that.
I mean, you can help people, but like I think one of the good examples is with parole. I was a parole agent. The parole doesn't have anything to house or house, feed, find jobs. They say that they do, but really they're farming it out to everybody else. And then those companies don't work for parole or Department of Correction, so they don't need to listen to you or do anything. And then if you, on a personal level, tried to help somebody, like I would say I give a guy that just got out of prison my jacket. Well, then he goes and sells the jacket and comes back and says, I need another jacket. Or, hey, I need a tent. Okay, I'll give you a tent. What happened to your tent? I don't know. So you're dealing with all of these other factors where a lot of these people are not on the same page. And a lot of them are, you're dealing with the, part of the community that is, they're not seeing things the same way you are.
And is that because they've grown up in challenged environments? They might have mental health problems. They've come through correctional facilities.
Yeah, most of them have been, raised in institutions. So going back to juvenile hall to, probation, they're all familiar with it. And they've all been, I always looked at it like you were raised in a cement box, basically. And along with that came all this trauma, childhood trauma. I would always ask them, how'd your parents used to wake you up in the morning? Oh, they throw some hot cup of coffee in my face or put cigarette butts off my head. So just a lot of trauma, verbal and physical. And so these are people that they don't really trust other people. So when when I would come along in my job, it would take a long time for them to trust you. But in the end, again, they're more trusting than the people that you work with. And like, I didn't have anybody when I retired ask me how you doing, but the criminals have asked me how. They still call me and say, hey, how you doing? So I think that says a lot.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And you were here in LA County, or were you?
Yeah. I covered the first place that I covered was South Central. So you're seeing so much crime going on. And then, I was talking the other day where you would go into certain areas where there'd just be drugs, prostitution, gambling, and you just, you'd be trying to think of, well, should I call the police? And then when you call the police, they don't care. And your job is this caseload of guys that just got out of prison. So you can't worry about this other crime that's going on. So you kind of got to sort out what it is that you can do. And so I would just concentrate on, okay, what's in front of me? These are the guys that I can help. And it really just comes down to, you can help a handful of them. And you try not to, kind of get obsessed with trying to help everybody.
That's strange. So it sounds like there's kind of two parts of law enforcement. One is, stopping people from doing crimes and arresting people and things like that. And then it seems like the back end of having people come through a correctional facility and then be on probation or something like that. And then you kind of having to make sure that they get integrated back into society in a correct way. Is that like a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's what they're telling you. You need to reintegrate these guys. But basically, they're guys that they don't even show up. So, and that's what I go back to. They're not very trusting to begin with, because I think a lot of times they've been lied to by everybody. Like, this idea that you're going to get helped out with a job, or, once you once you get out of prison, don't worry, everybody's going to help you, and nobody's really helping them, and they get kind of lost in the system. And especially the ones who are mentally ill, like you have massive homeless. Well, a lot of these guys before were in prison, and then they decriminalized the laws, and they got out. Now they're living on the streets, and a lot of them really, because of mental illness, don't know where to go to get help. And that's the problem: is the people that are getting the help are kind of overshadowing the ones that don't mentally even know how to do it.
That's crazy. And I mean, definitely living in Los Angeles, you see that on, people on the street. Like, so I lived in Shanghai, China for 18 years, and the government really cleaned up the streets there over the years I was there. Then I was in Dubai for a couple of years, and now I've just been in LA for about 5 months, and just not so much in this neighborhood, but other neighborhoods of town. It's really quite devastating to see all these people kind of homeless and in tents and things like that, even though it's much better now than it was like 6 or 8 months ago, I think.
Yeah, I mean, very sad for me. I would go visit somebody in a tent and say, hey, I could get you a place to live. I have I know where to find you a place to live. No, I don't want one. And they're just, because they are so mentally ill, they're used to living in absolute garbage. And I couldn't force them, because they have rights. So I couldn't force them to go to certain places. But to me, it was very sad.
Very, very sad. It's so strange how the deck is stacked against anyone who comes out of a correctional facility and tries to like reintegrate like into society. I feel like if you've been in jail and you put that on your resume, you'll never get a job anywhere. Like, is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do also with, once in a while they would have programs where, hey, we want to get these guys jobs, and nobody would show up. It was kind of like we'd have like a toy drive at Christmas and all these toys, and I would tell everybody, hey, we got free toys for you to give to your family. Nobody would show up, and it was just everybody kind of thought the exact same way, and I think it is hopelessness. It's people looking at, well, nobody cares, so why should I even try?
That's
just infectious,
Yeah, that's the worst.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's go back a bit, if you don't mind. Where are you from originally?
From Pasadena.
Okay.
Originally, I was born in Boyle Heights. I'm adopted, so I was born in on what Mother's Ward, and then I was raised in Pasadena.
Okay.
So seeing prison system, huge eye opener to me. I'd never been around gangs or anything like that. I had no idea, and so it was a huge culture shock.
Because Pasadena is quite a relaxed place to live, I think, right? Yeah. And
amazing. Yeah.
And so in your early formidable years, were you playing sports? Were you, when did you get this idea that maybe like law enforcement might be for you?
A lot of it was just, I wanted health insurance. I had jobs, and I was kind of looking around, and I didn't have the internet at the time to like fact check stuff. So, I had a friend that said, it's easy to go work in a prison. And I'd filling out applications and waiting for them to come through the mail. And finally, that was the first one that did for the prison. And then when I graduated from their boot camp, it was like, hey, we're raising this up to a maximum security prison. And then you're getting kind of letters from other places. And I'm like, I don't want to go through another academy again. And then as longer that you get into it, the more money that you're making. And then you're looking around, probably about 4 years in, I was looking at other friends of mine where they didn't have jobs. So it is consistently to have a job. It's just you're working in this horrible place, which is 99%, boredom with 1% terror.
So did you work for the prison facility, or did you work for the police?
For prison, it's the state. So
Okay.
you first had to work in a prison, which I didn't really have to, but the different, in college when I had internships, they would say, oh, don't worry, you got a degree and you'll be up in a tower, which is a complete lie. But it was simply just because my internships were with probation or parole, and they didn't know kind of what was going on, basically how to get into the prison or what to do. And my ultimate objective was to be a parole agent, but then they had hiring freezes, so I got stuck in there. And so it was a lot of it is just, a lot of it was luck that I was able to get through that long, because they had so many layoffs, so many amounts of times, and so many people come and go. And it's just it's what people with your coworkers, they're just coming and going, and you just basically kind of just forget about, the people that you work with.
Forgetting about making friends or, building lasting connections in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. So you went to college to be a parole officer?
Not to be a parole officer, but I went there. My degree was sociology, so I was like, prison basically always interested me, because prior to that, it was hard to find information. I'd be in college classes and asking, like a professor, like, hey, where do they bury these guys?
I got you there.
And thank you.
Nice.
They didn't have the answers because a lot of the professors they didn't work in law enforcement. They were professors.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more curiosity. And then I also wanted to be a writer. I was making no money at writing. So I was like, well, I'll work in a prison. I'll write a book about it. And, there are just so many stories of prison. So it was very fascinating to me, but other people they're not as fascinated as I was. So like when I was collecting, I would collect shanks and stuff, and I would have art shows for it. Nobody else that I worked with cared about that stuff. That wasn't interesting to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a subculture in itself, and that's the downside to it. Is it's so negative, and you're going there every day, and you're just feeling like I just felt unhealthy. Like this is the healthiest I've ever felt in the last 23 years because I'm away from there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you look great, by the way. So, okay, let's walk this back because I'm Canadian, so forgive me. Are the prisons in California state-run, or are they privately run?
They're state-run, but they also have privately run, and then there's this battle between state and private, and, there's this outcry about, that they shouldn't profit off of prisons. So it's just it gets a lot of political. The main thing I think a lot of people confuse are jails and prisons. Jails are run by the sheriffs, by county, prisons state.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because there's a lot of you see a lot of statistics around saying like the United States has the most incarcerated people in the world by a factor of like 3 or something like that, and this there was a move maybe like more than a decade ago where they were like trying to privatize more prisons or something like that to make them like more efficient and get it all off the government books. But then the government is paying these private prisons per inmate, right? And then the cost of keeping these people in jail was just massive. I remember.
Oh, yeah. And the main thing with that fight is that we're a union, and so the union, that's the union's job, is to get rid of the people that are trying to muscle in on their money, and it just all comes down to money. It's a huge budget for the state. Especially with parole, like there's no need for parole. They could easily get rid of parole, and they kind of just keep parole around as the punching bag to kind of blame, anything that happens. We can just blame it on parole, but it's really unnecessary to have it. And I think that the people would benefit more if there was no parole.
Well, that's interesting. We're gonna unpack that soon as we move through. But I'm just curious, like, so you're a young man, you went to college, sociology. You had an idea of being a parole officer, and then your first job, you get put into a maximum security prison. And what are you, like 22?
I was 27.
And you were working in a maximum security prison. And because you had a degree, someone said you might be up in the guard tower instead of like down in the yard and amongst all.
Yeah, or in the on the yard of the housing unit where everybody is, and that was shocking to me. I didn't realize you've got these killers, murderers, and rapists that are right up next to you. Sometimes they'll put their arm around you. They're not supposed to, but that's so total culture shock.
So in that first prison job that you had, how many inmates were in that prison?
There's 5,000, and
5,000.
So each there's 4 yards, and then there's a minimum yard, and then they were putting inmates in bunks. There's whatever they could kind of put people in. One of the big things was like there were a lot of drug crimes, so you'd see people doing 16 months. Like they got caught with a piece of crack, so they were doing 16 months. So you'd see people cycle in and out all the time, and probably about 80% were cycling in and out. That was kind of the joke. I'm never coming back here, and then you'd see them right back in there again
for some like small drug possession kind of thing, which is maybe less common these days because California has pretty lenient drug laws now. All of a sudden,
everything's changed. Burglary was a big one, and that's nothing. Right as I kind of left, I was seeing a lot of gun charges that used to get you 5 years, which they would just kind of give them a ticket and give the gun back. So a lot has changed since especially when I was in the prison.
And that's because they're trying to cut costs.
Yeah, keep people out. And again, I was all for that. I really, from the beginning, I was like, really, you're putting a guy in a cement box, 8x10? Like, I think we could do a little better. But so far, they haven't done that.
I've been fascinated by the prison system in the United States for quite a while, right? I've seen a lot of documentaries. It's amazing how someone who isn't even convicted can end up in a jail or a holding cell or something like that for months or years before they're even given their day in court. And the amount of stuff that happens during that time to a potential prisoner when they're not even convicted seems insane to me also. Like, and then I guess by the time they got to you, they were already convicted, and then they had to like start their time. But it just seems like millions of people are in this system just rolling through, and it's like an entire universe unto itself.
It really is. And I always tell people, you could get arrested for anything, and they could go and book you into county jail, any jail, and you could just sit there, and you have to go call and get somebody to bail you out because it's, that's related to money, or you have to call somebody that's going to come pick you up. And if you were, then a trial is set. If you do have to go to trial, then you got to get an attorney. You got to pay for that attorney. So it devastates a lot of people. It takes everything away from you, and you're fighting for your right to prove that you're innocent. And I would see that once in a while. You would see somebody that, wow, this person had a bad attorney, or these charges are really strange, because you got a police officer that wanted to write down like everything. And because sometimes cops they can't stop being cops. So they'll charge you with everything. Or the district attorney wants to then run for politics, or an attorney wants to run for politics, so they're going to nail this person for everything. So it really is a very lopsided system. And that was a system that I was in all the time, because I would have to go to court for the parolees. And so I was in and out of court all the time.
Yeah.
I would have to be there at 7 o'clock, but the judge didn't have to be there until 10:30. So everything was waiting on the judge and then the attorney. So there's this pecking order that goes along in the justice system.
It seems insane. I would really love to dig into like your actual experience working at a maximum security prison. I mean, like, how intimidating. I mean, I think we can all agree, like, jails are built to look scary.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what was it like at 27 going on day one to work at a maximum security institution?
Day one, I was physically sick, because I remember that day, and I remember standing in the parking lot going, why don't I just drive off and leave? And it really is. Everybody is afraid. And if they weren't afraid, then something's wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
You just have this level of fear, and then walking in there, but then you're dealing. To me, it was. I'm asking people, hey, where's my post? Where am I supposed to go to? I don't know. And, well, where did I find this? I don't know. So there was so many people that are working against you. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to help you. And you're really relying on the inmates. The inmates are telling you, oh, building 3 is where you go get your equipment.
The inmates were doing that.
To me, that was the hardest part of all, was just trying. All I wanted to do was put me in a position where I can learn this job. But when you're new, you're covering behind people that went on vacation or they're out sick. So you're always these new positions, and you're just trying to learn something. So to me, that was the hardest part. I really couldn't worry about, I just kind of put that out of my mind, but I really looked at it like, all right, I'm here, I'm kind of already dead, so I might as well deal with it. And you're kind of relying, there was one guy my first day that was, that would speak to me. So they had a stabbing my first day. So the yard was slammed, which is there's no movement. So you're feeding these guys in their cell. And so that's all that we did all day long. Basically, was feed them in their cells.
And that was a stabbing between 2 inmates, not a stabbing against one of the correctional officers.
Yes. Yeah. It was usually inmates fighting each other, and that was usually. I mean, there were alarms. You would hear alarms every day, and there'd usually be, I'd say, a stabbing probably like once a week. Numbers wise, it's rare only because it's prison, so you're expecting all this stuff. But it was this level of, violence, and I mean, that's how everybody solved all their problems, with violence. And you couldn't. To me, it was like they could do a better job of sitting down and, hey, why are you here? Let's have some sort of therapy. And that was never a factor. My whole job was just housing and feeding these guys. There
was never any real effort to rehabilitate or really kind of get to the core of who these people are.
No, nobody cared. And if you ever, I got disciplined for trying to teach a guy to read.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah. So if you do become, you're not supposed to, but you do become friends with them because you're with them all the time. And then if you kind of cross that line, or somebody else comes along and says, you're being too friendly with them, they get mad at you. And that's what I mean. You have more problems with the people that you work with, where I'm just trying to be a human being to somebody, and then you're getting ostracized from other people that you work with.
How corrupt? What has to I played sports when I was young, right? Like most people, and to think of like a team, like, a group of people who are working in a correctional facility, like, you guys have to be a team. You have to work together. You have to communicate. You have to watch each other's backs. You have to teach each other, life learned lessons from the veterans, to the rookies. And that is my vision of how maybe most of these things might work. But the way you're describing it, like how broken does the morale have to be in a company, or in a government institution that oversees that prison? How corrupt and miserable does that have to be, where you're on your first day and everyone's just not even giving a shit and not even telling you where to go to get your uniform and your security badge and where your post is? That just seems ridiculous. Like, the job is hard enough already. Why not help the people who are working and make the work experience better? Like, that seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, sports-wise, it's a lot of people that don't even want to be on the team. So
that's a good point. Yes,
and they'll tell you that. I don't want to be here. I don't like you. And
you seem like a nice guy, though. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, I feel that I'm a nice person, but I think that that's the thing, is that I was definitely in the wrong place to be a nice person.
That's probably true, actually.
And so I would say, hey, I'm here to help. No, that's not why you're here. So the answer that you gave was never the right answer, and it was just about being confused. There was just a lot of narcissism, but the reason it is because you're given this huge amount of power and authority over somebody. I mean, think about it. It's green, the officers in uniforms, against blue, and then you hold. I can see both sides to it. I mean, I can see if you're in prison, you don't have any rights. So when you're trying to complain or get something that you want, the officer doesn't care because they're allowed to not care. They don't have to care about anybody. And so that's what I mean by it's infectious, is people just they don't care. So other people go, well, I don't care either. And then even to me, where I'd be like, in the beginning I was caring, and then I'm like, well, nobody else cares, so why should I?
Also, too, maybe because the job is so hard, emotionally, mentally, probably physically too, maybe everyone just creates this like thick outer layer so that no one can get to them, and that's like a defense mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, definitely my first, I got into acting in the first set that I was on. The director after yelled cut, came and hugged me, and I was so not used to that emotion, and why is this person doing that? So it really made me reflect on, you're not allowed to have any emotions when you're in that job at all, and nobody else. And if you start to have emotions, people will put you down for it.
And is that like a sign of weakness?
Oh yeah. And you're not allowed to fail, because with acting, that's, anything kind of with arts is about failure, and you're not allowed to fail. You would hear that all the time. Failure's not an option, which to me is ridiculous, because you're failing all the time in life.
Yeah, but as a prison guard at a maximum security prison, I guess failure isn't an option, because maybe someone will escape or someone will get hurt or killed, and that's what you're dealing with on a daily basis.
Which is, it's all possible, but from what I saw in my experiences, there could be so many. It could be fixed so easily by just with changing the way that they view things, because it's an old world model. I think with a lot of things, it's when people are set in their ways, everybody fears change, so they don't want to change. And again, anytime I would mention things like that, I would get screamed at. How dare I have those thoughts? So you just stop talking to other people about it with your coworkers. You don't bring up new ideas. That's one thing about prison. Everybody hated new ideas.
That seems like the total opposite of the way things should be.
Yeah. But I mean, it would be, you could solve like a lot of your problems if you just sat down and saw both sides to it. But nobody wants to do that. They want to look at the money issue. What are they personally going to get out of it? And that's what kind of corrupts people.
And is that what everyone was just worried about? Like the people who are working in a position like you, like they just worried about their salary, worried about overtime, worried about expenses, and that was it? Like they just didn't care about
No, everybody just worried about themselves. And, it's like I worked with a guy that lost his leg, and I was like, well, aren't we going to are we going to like call this guy? No, screw that guy. He's not showing up for work. It's like insanity, and it's like no compassion at all for anybody. And that's what it is. If you got hurt, it was, you're a weak for getting hurt and not showing up for work.
That's insane. So at that time when you're working for a maximum security prison, are you a government employee then, or are you a private employee of that?
You're government, yeah.
Yeah, but isn't that like an embarrassing attitude for government employees to have?
Completely, but it's never got changed. It was embarrassing, my wife certainly never wanted to tell anybody what I did, and I don't blame her. But you would go to especially everybody's kind of having kids, so you're going to these kids' birthday parties, and nobody understands what you do. And I can't tell people like, oh yeah, this morning I had to go cell extract somebody. Nobody knows what you're talking about, nor do they care what you're talking about. So you just stop talking to people, and you really are. And I still see that with friends of mine in law enforcement. You just shut down, and you just you just figure nobody's going to understand me, so you just don't.
Like that is just the definition of a broken system. Yeah. Wow. So what was it like year one working in a maximum security prison? I mean, like, how, I guess two things I'm wondering, like, how did you emotionally and mentally deal with that stress on a daily basis? And, were there any incidents that were, that really made you question this line of work?
I mean, a lot of it every day questioned it just because it was so mind-numbing, and I'd be like, hey, why don't we talk about, something else? And it was always just the same thing. It was about overtime, and then what position are you? And people would be upset if you had a good position that had days off. So you really just live day by day, and a lot of it was, you're just so exhausted after that certain amount of time. And then a lot of times you're getting forcefully held over for over 16 hours. So you're just going home and sleeping. And it really is no life. And, for my family, there's a lot of people working there that are related to each other, family, through marriage or mother, father, whatever. So they already know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect. My family didn't know what to expect. So I really did see that. Like, I've got to find a way to get out of here, because otherwise I would have just left. But I was able to transfer and get out of there and go to parole.
Okay.
But you still had people, you had people that went to parole and they didn't like it. They went back to the prison. So a lot of it is, I really looked at it like it's a war going on, and a lot of people get very comfortable with it, and that's the only thing that they know. And I think that also goes back to, I've had 6 coworkers that have taken their lives afterwards, because that was their entire life, and that is, for some people, it's their entire life.
So coworkers that worked with you at the prison, they committed suicide after their retirement, or after they, yeah.
Because a lot of it is this unknown, and I was, right before I retired, I was on headache medication, blood pressure medication, and shocker, when I'm not working there anymore, I'm not on any medication at all.
Yeah, you look much happier, yeah.
Very unknown stress, and then if you try to talk about it, this is the other thing about there, you're not allowed to go to therapy. If you go to therapy, they take your badge and your gun from you for going to therapy. You can be an alcoholic, because then you can go to treatment, but it's just very bizarre how they handle anybody that's actually asking for help mentally.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, they'll say no, it's okay. We're here to help you. They're never there to help you. I mean, you talk about HR being against you. If you ever try to go to, the HR, they'll do whatever they can to work against you. So and that's why I say it's a cult, because everybo's working against you, and you're trying to, hey, I need help. Please help me. Oh yeah, we're going to help you. We're going to help you lose your job.
That sounds ridiculous. Is this like the culture of just like one prison, or is this a culture of like, do you think this culture is replicated?
I think it's all of them, because at the time there were 33 prisons, and I've known people from different prisons and stuff like that, and they'll all kind of tell you the same. I mean, the prison that I was at was like a dumping ground for people that got in trouble at other prisons.
Oh, that's the worst of the worst.
And then went there, and you had all these problems with people, and because it is paramilitary, what am I supposed to say when a sergeant or lieutenant comes at me crazy? There's nothing I can say, because I'm going to get in trouble for saying something, so I have to keep my mouth shut, and I'm not allowed to add my 2 cents, even though I know that they're wrong. So it gets very hard.
Did you have, as a correctional facility officer, like, did you have any female coworkers, or was it all male?
Oh no, you have female.
Yeah. Also working amongst the inmates like you were?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be terrifying.
Oh
yeah.
I mean, but it's not like, because again, you're housing and feeding. And I mean, one of the women that I worked with, I mean, she could beat the hell out of anybody. I mean, she could have lifted me up over her head, smashed me on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So more than capable of doing the job. You just think, like, why would you want to work in a prison? But again, it's people want the benefits. Before that, I never had a job that had vacation or holiday. And when I left my job, I had hundreds of thousands of vacation days, because they would never let me take a day off, which is another thing. They'll deny you your days off, so now you have all this money to cash out at the end, because it's owed to you, but they're never letting you take those days off.
Did they at least honor that?
Yeah, they honor it. Yeah. It would have been nice if I could take a vacation with my family, But you're owned by that job. You're 24 hours a day. Your bosses are calling you all the time, screaming at you, and again, you can't say anything. What am I supposed to say? And then what if I go and file on that? They just come and retaliate against me. So
Yeah, you can't tell anyone or they'll just treat you worse, right? Yeah. Wow, I mean, you had your freedom and you could leave every day, but it sounds almost as bad as being a prisoner.
It is, and you would hear the inmates' phrase would be like, "You're no different from me." And after time, yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, you got committed of a crime. I'm just trying to do my job. But when it comes down to it, we're both human beings,
Mm-hmm.
and I could easily, trade places with you and nobody would care.
But no one's treating anyone else like a human being. That's the funny thing. It's like we're all human beings, but you don't treat the inmates like human beings. They don't treat you like human beings. And then your own staff, who are supposed to be like a team working together to stay safe and then also help these people rehabilitate and go back out into society, seems like everything is broken down.
Yeah, it's just kicking the can down the road. It's, like with parole, before these guys got out, they would have like, this big meeting on the phone about, all these services. And it was always the parole agent is going to do this. And, I can't say, well, that service isn't there. I would just say, oh, okay. Because really what it is they just want to get that guy out of there so they can put another guy in there. They really don't care about that guy. And then the culture shock for him is, I've been institutionalized this entire time. I don't know what parole is. And they're just giving him $200 and telling him to go show up at this place with really no direction or anything of what it is that I'm expected to do. So now there's all these new rules that he or she are supposed to follow. And it starts all over again. And a lot of them, that's why I say you could get rid of parole easily, because I think it hinders a lot of people, because there is somebody chasing them constantly rather than they don't really have the freedom. They're on parole.
Yeah, that it's kind of like a black cloud hanging over you, following you everywhere. I feel like probably causes a lot of anxiety and stress.
Oh, yeah, I would see it all the time. Yeah.
So when you were working in the prison, what kind of jobs did you have? Like, what, if you could walk me through like some of the different jobs you did, I think that'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah, you're back to housing and feeding. You're basically like, you could be an officer. There'd usually be 16 officers on the yard. Then there'd be 2 officers. There'd be 5 housing units, which there would be 200 inmates in the housing unit, and there'd be 100 cells, so that inmates would be 2 to a cell, and then there'd be 2 officers on the floor, and then there'd be 1 up in the control booth. So you really had a low amount compared to the 1,000 inmates that you would have on the yard, and you'd walk in through these different checkpoints. It'd take you probably about a half hour to get through all these checkpoints to get into the prison. It is all this walking to get there. And then you're checking in, and then you're taking them off the yard because they're on the yard. So you're taking these 1,000 men back in and putting them back in their cell, and then you're releasing those cell again to go to the chow hall. So that's a good chunk of a couple hours to feed everybody. And then depending on what yard you're at, you could have night yard again, or you could have day room, which is they're basically out of their cells. They're watching the 2 TVs that are in their day room, or they're playing cards or whatever it is. But a lot of it is free activity, and then during the day, if you've got a job, sometimes you're taking them to their job. Like there could be outside work crews, they're going somewhere. It just depends on your classification.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Like how much of a day would a prisoner be actually in their cell?
I mean, kind of like a couple hours, because their main goal is to get out. And I think I was always thinking if I was there, I would never leave. But then when I would be in the cells, I'd be like, oh, well, no wonder. You want to get out of the cell. It's just like you want to go take a shower because you just want to get out of your cell. So a lot of the day revolves around it starts at 6, so you can get out by 6. And then sometimes with a night yard, you could be back in by, I think the count was at 9:30. So you could spend all day kind of in. And that was the goal for a lot of guys. I want to find a job where I can kind of roam around the prison, go find a job somewhere. And, and certain jobs were limited and didn't pay, at the time when I was there, like you could be, you'd sweep the floor, you get 25 cents an hour. That was another thing. It's like, something they don't like to talk about, but they pay those guys nothing to have these jobs.
Well, they've done entire documentaries about prisoners doing manufacturing work in the prisons and being paid nothing compared to what it would cost in society, and having these companies like basically use slave labor.
Yes, which is why the private companies want them, and why the state wants to not have them. And so that's kind of the thing they don't really like to talk about. But yeah, I think they have some of these great manufacturing jobs that would be $125 an hour at the time.
You got to work for like 6 hours just to get a Starbucks coffee.
Yeah. And so that was one of the things I would say, why don't you pay these guys a minimum wage? And how dare you? So they didn't like that, my idea either for that.
Because I mean, at least when they get out, they can have some money to like get their lives back up and running.
What they don't do, and what they should do, is like at the prison I worked at, they were manufacturing soap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why don't you have that on the outside where they get out and they're working in the same place where they know the same people and they're getting, nope, that doesn't happen. You're just released. And
yeah, that would make sense, right? Like have a soap factory in the prison so they can work while they're incarcerated. And then when they get out, you can ask them if they'd like to work in that same soap factory and pay them properly maybe. And then at least they don't have to go through the anxiety, the stress, and probably the disappointment of having to find their own private sector job.
Well, I mean, think about when you get out, you don't have anything, right? Because everything's been taken away. So you don't have a driver's license anymore. You don't have any of your identification. That's the first thing that you do. You go to social services because you want some sort of income or something. And then you got to go to the DMV and all these places. Why not have your ID and all that stuff waiting for you when you get out?
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that they never liked either. How about a job when they get out to support their family? So that's a large reason why these guys come back, is because now their family is telling them to go get a job, or their family is telling them, all the negative things that they weren't hearing when they were. Because when you're institutionalized and you're having visit days, everybody's on their best behavior for that visit. But now once you're out in the real world again, everybody's telling you how horrible you are again. So a lot of them, I came back because I was tired of listening to my old lady and I was tired of listening to my family, and they'll tell you that.
That's insane. Yeah. Because like, okay, you've got a prison, you've got 5,000 inmates. Okay. Drug dealers, rapists, murderers, et cetera. Maybe they made mistakes. Maybe it's inherent in their character. Maybe they got dragged into something by a friend. You never know, right? Like everyone has their own story of why they should or shouldn't be there, and it's not for us to judge, right? But you'd think like giving them at least half of a chance to not come back would be something that would be in the benefit of everyone. Like, I guess active, healthy members of society are better than incarcerated members of society. So having a driver's license and having an entry point maybe into some kind of work would probably be a huge stepping point to keep them coming back into the system.
Oh yeah. I mean, even like as a parole agent, I would say people would show up homeless, or they'd show up, when places would be closed for intake because they had certain hours. And why can't you have a place that's right there where the parole office is, where, okay, well, temporarily you can stay here right now, and that solves that problem? That never happened. I mean, you would save so much money, and that's another thing that the state was always saying, is we don't have the money for it. But if they actually looked into what they were doing, which they never do, they could save a lot of money doing it.
Yeah. Wow, that's just, I mean, yeah. Okay, so how long were you working in the prison before you moved into the field of parole?
5 years. And that's another thing, as I was told, you don't worry, you're going to be there for, under a year and you're going to get out of there. So a lot of that was me just taking it every day because I only have to be for a year. But then when I got to a year, it was like, oh yeah, we had hiring freeze. So, like at the third year, I was like just so depressed being there. I took my application and walked it into the headquarters downtown in LA. I wasn't going to chance the mail or anything like that. I wanted to get out of there so badly.
And you still do another 2 years after that.
And I still did another, yeah. And that was the waiting time, because then the academies get canceled, and there's a lot of different factors of why you don't get certain jobs.
Right.
But again, that's looking back. That's why I tell people, if you ever want to get into law, just be a lawyer, because the lawyers run everything.
Really? Is that the truth? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Don't even bother.
Well, that's interesting. I do have a friend who's a police officer in North Carolina, and he's obviously had a tough run the last couple of years. We chat a little bit from time to time, but he's definitely definitely had some thoughts about maybe changing his career or just struggling with it a little bit more. But no, it's interesting. So, I mean, you're working in the prison, maximum security, and all you want to do is get out, like into a different job, into a different role, but it took you 5 years to shift. And now you're dealing with parole. So what was your job as a parole officer?
So my first one, I was in South Central, and I got a caseload, and at that time it was like hundreds of guys. That was the most cases I ever had.
But you're in the prison.
No, you're not in the prison. Now you're out on the street.
Okay, but so as a parole officer, don't you have to choose who gets out of the prison early or something like that?
Well, I mean, you can make a recommendation, but for the most part, they're giving a set time, and they're told this is the day that you're going to parole. So they already know the day that they're going to get out, and then they're told to come show up at the office.
So you're dealing with them once they get out of prison.
Yes, they've done their time, and now they're on for pretty much for another 3 years, which to me was, again, setting them up for failure. Like, really, you're going to have this guy out for 3 years? Well, why don't we just have if the parole officer is saying they're going to do okay, why don't you believe the parole officer? And they never do, because you would have, these guys that were up for parole after their, first year, and they had a job and they had a place to live and they're doing everything. And then your boss goes, no, I don't like his commitment offense. We're going to retain him and keep him on for another 2 years. So it was all these other factors that were working against this guy that they never even met before.
Is there some monetary value to keeping these people on parole for extra? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it's also a numbers game, because you've got to, the dwindling numbers out of the prison also affects the parole agents.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have low numbers for, parole agents, then the parole agents, if they lose their job, they get to go bump somebody and go back to the prison, which happened to me about 2008. They started laying everybody off. But when you're a parole agent, you can go back to the prison if you worked in the prison. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And it became within one person of me of getting sent back to the prison. So I came very close.
How anxious were you during that time?
Yeah, it's horrible. And that was a big thing for me. It was just running on anxiety. My whole day would basically be looking forward to, like, what delicious lunch I could eat, and what coworker could I go talk, trash with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you just look forward to, because it was just so miserable.
Okay, so let's assume I get out of the prison in South Central Los Angeles. Let's say I went there for a crime, and I did my time, and I come to you. And what's the process for you to get me back into society successfully?
Well, my first thing is, if you showed up on time and got there, you're going to be okay.
I'm super on time.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
And you could tell who's going to be okay and who's not. And the problem is the bulk of your caseload are people that are just, they've run, they're getting arrested in other states or out of the country or whatever. So when you show up, you're signing all this paperwork, you're taking their pictures and stuff, which, again, I don't know why I'm taking your pictures. You've been in prison this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
They could take his pictures before.
Yeah.
And then you're getting an address, and then I have a few days where I've got to go see them at the address and, find out their family and stuff like that. And again, if you see that they're living in a stable place, you're like, oh, this guy's going to be okay. For them, 99% of them, they're going to be okay. And you have a whole collection of, one of the guys I still talk to, he was somebody who started a trucking business within like the first month that he was out. And I was like, this guy's going to.
Yeah. I mean, like, you do hear some success stories of people who use their time being incarcerated to put together a business plan or decide to go back to school. Like, there are good stories that come out from time to time, but it's definitely the minority.
Yeah. Well, the main thing is most of these guys are, they're hooked on, the big drug was meth.
Mm-hmm.
They're hooked on meth, or they're hooked on heroin or whatever. So you can't really communicate with somebody that's all whacked out like that, or they're on, they're mentally ill. So they're on medications and stuff like that. Or I meet a lot they had epilepsy and they were having seizures. And then if I would convey that to my bosses, they would tell me I'm not a doctor and I'm not allowed to talk about that. So these are people that would be lost in a system. They're having seizures. They can't function. Their brain's not functioning, but nobody knows what's going on. And I'm powerless to do anything because I'm not a doctor.
And that's not your job.
Right. That's not my job. So
stay in your lane.
Very sad.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Yeah. I mean, you're really not helping anyone, are you?
No. I mean, and then if you're bringing that up and saying we're not helping anybody, then I'm screamed at by my supervisors. How dare I say that, And that was the thing. You just learn not to talk to your supervisors because they're going to get upset. And then when their supervisor's like, why didn't you come talk to me? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. And you're just lying all the time because you're getting scrutinized for everything that you do all the time.
The only way a system like that could be so abusive and so corrupt and so shitty is if someone was making huge amounts of money.
Well, and it is. It's a huge amount of our budget for the state. And I'm first one to say I was making a huge amount of money, as that was a job that I would talk to other friends that would be shocked at the amount of money that I made. And
I mean, that's great that they took that money from the state to house those criminals, those convicted criminals. And it's great that they also paid you an above, I mean, they didn't pay you at all what the job is worth, probably, because you had so many health issues.
They're creating jobs, and that's what it is. It's just, it's a way to create jobs, and then you're saying that we're battling crime, and I get all that. But there are certain people where, especially with parole, you would see in the prison, you didn't really know what they did. You didn't have access. But with parole, you would have their caseload, and you would be able to read through it. And there were tons of guys where I'd be like, I don't even know why they gave this guy, like the guy that started the trucking company, they gave him 17 years for verbally threatening somebody over the phone.
17 years for calling someone an asshole over the phone, or I'm going to kill you or something like that.
Got him with terrorist threats. And so there's all these laws that...
17 years.
And then nobody, obviously he had a bad attorney or didn't have the money to do it, but there's so many people that's how you're falling through the system. I had another guy that was a legitimate actor who was in a lot of stuff, and he got high one day and just pulled over his car and jumped a wall and walked into a house, and there was a woman in the shower, and he walked over there and he had a tree branch and just shook the tree branch. And they gave him a bunch of years for that, and that ruined that guy's life. He hasn't been in any films ever since. But stuff like that where you'd be like, oh, okay, well, he was really high and nobody got hurt. And so, but it is this knee-jerk reaction of we've got to punish this guy. And I think that is where a lot of people are, It's like stuff that I did as a little kid. I still have parents that are upset. They're still punishing me because of, like, I swam over at a friend's house in their pool, and I'm still getting punished by the family because I went over there and swam at the pool, So it's this idea of punishing people constantly. And then people are happy about that. They feel good when they can say that we're punishing people. When my thought is, well, why don't we just think about, how'd that person get there? And they never really talk about that.
How that person got there. And then, of course, like, punishment is never the fastest way to rehabilitation. Like, it's okay, sure, it's important because you need the rest of society to know that if you do this crime, you're going to do the time, right? I guess that's the lesson that we all need to learn. Like, it's wrong to kill someone. If you kill someone, this is what's going to happen to you.
Wrong to kill someone. Yes, don't do that.
But then it's like, if you've been allotted a period of time to rehabilitate yourself, and then you do get to come out, like the chances of going back are like you're definitely going to end up back in jail. Like, it just seems like there's nothing for these people to do once they're in jail other than to go back to jail.
Yeah, and there could be so many great things to be doing when you're in there and you have all that time to do that. And a lot of them don't do that. I would hear constantly them saying, well, it's not my job to do anything. Your job is to stop me from committing crimes. A lot of it is mental. It's the way that you're viewing things and thinking about things. But there are those people, and those are ones that I would take time to try to help, that you knew they were going to be okay. They just needed a little help to do that.
On television, this is going to sound silly, but on TV, like when you watch stories, television shows, movies about prisons and stuff like that, like you see that there's common rooms. You see them like, there's a library. You see there's a chance to take courses or to find religion or something like that. Like, did they have all those things at the jail you worked at?
Oh yeah. And like, I would say, hey, you guys want to read? Yeah, nobody's ever offered me a book. And I would go and the guy who was in charge, this librarian guy who was just out there, would never give them any books for anything. So it would be, well, that's that guy's job. He's supposed to do that. So I would go to the library and check the book out for them. But then they would be mad that I checked out the library because that's not my job. So there's all this again, it's the red tape, the politics. You're trying to help, but then you're getting punished for trying to help.
You just seem like way too much of a team player to be on a shitty team.
Yeah. And that's, I felt that, but I would gravitate towards other guys that it would be like 10% of other coworkers that I knew I could rely on. And I really did look at it like those guys that saved my life. And there were, a couple of them where the things that they would tell me, I'd be like, that makes so much sense. Cause I had like one friend of mine who had been in the Marine Corps and he'd been in Iraq, and he'd be like, no, it's completely screwed up. But I would always try to get off the base so that I wouldn't have to deal with the people that I was working with. And to me, why do you want to get off base? That's a safe place to be. Mm. He just wanted to get away from those people, people that were so nuts.
I've heard some crazy stories about some friends that were in the military and served overseas and stuff like that. It was very challenging. And then coming back, to a society that doesn't respect them and doesn't give them opportunities as well. I mean, it's crazy.
And especially now with law enforcement, people have figured out I don't have to be nice to this person. And a lot of that comes from, it's been years of you treating people like garbage. And me also, I'm pulled over. The people who've been horrible to me have been cops. Being pulled over by somebody that is convinced my car is stolen. It's a state car. It just doesn't have any plates. They don't want to listen. I have a badge and a gun and all my identification, and they still think that I'm a criminal, and they want to arrest me. and they don't want to listen or anything like that. People have figured that out. They figured out, I don't have to really listen to you,
Mhm.
and so the level of anger that they've always put on people, it's backfired.
Mhm.
And people have figured that out. And that's why you have all these people that are protesting and rioting. And then you also have, the news doesn't really want to give you the entire truth, and they don't really want to, give you the whole story. They want to kind of get this, let's see if we can run the story a couple days, and then you figure out what actually really happened 5 days later. So it's all different sides.
Yeah. And it seems like obviously California is the biggest state in the United States by population. I think there's like 38 million people in California, more than all of Canada, by the way. So it must also, by those statistics, it must also have the most incarcerated people in any state.
Right, which is something that's never reported. It's always this, we don't know why there's so many people that are arrested. Well, it's because you have those people, and that's a lot of, as a parole agent, you would ask, well, where are you from? I'm from another state. Well, why did you come here? I just always wanted to go to Los Angeles. So everybody wants to come here because it's Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And people will just roll up, and then they'll go out and party and get arrested. And that was a crime that I saw a lot, was they went out drinking. They came from another state. They went drinking. They crashed their car, and somebody died in that accident. Well, they gave them 2 years for that. It's kind of the idea of, the joke was they came out here for vacation and left on parole.
That's terrible. Like, that's just, obviously, if you come out to party, you have to be safe and make sure you don't hurt yourself and don't hurt others. And if you fail at doing that, you end up in jail, right?
And same thing with, like what they say in AA is nothing good happens after 12 o'clock. I personally believe it's 10 o'clock, but so many times that's what these guys would do, is they'd be out partying, and, what, that would be my question. Where were you, and what time was it? Oh, it's 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. That's nothing good happens at 3 o'clock in the morning unless you're on set in hair and makeup.
Yeah. But, you're trying to tell these guys, especially that have been in prison, just, while you're on parole, don't leave your house dressed in gang colors, with a gun, high on meth. And you're probably going to be okay, but they don't listen to you because they're just so used to hanging out with their friends and going and committing crime. And it really is just, for them, a lot of them, it's just a way of life. And me, for my job, I had to look at things a little differently. I really had to look like, okay, he's showing up to my office dressed in gang colors, and he's never going to listen to me, and he's never going to stop doing it. So I'm just going to go to his house from now on, and he's not going to come to the office anymore, because my bosses weren't mad at him. They would get mad at me. How dare I let him wear those gang colors? So everything was always working against you from my job and my point of view. They were criminals for that time being on my caseload, so I had to mentally look at things different.
But as a parole officer, having someone come into your office that's not at the prison, that person is no longer a criminal. That person is someone who's a citizen who is rehabilitating themselves.
They're still criminals, and that's the other thing, is they have no rights because they're on parole, and that's the biggest factor why they keep parole, is that you do not need a warrant. And so the police love to have the parole agent come and search homes and everything else, because they don't need a warrant when they have a parole agent. So that's the power that I had. I could go in anywhere that I wanted to. I could search anything that I wanted to. Huge amount of power.
That's terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, imagine you got out of prison, and then here comes this guy you've never met before, and he's in your house. That was one thing I was always uncomfortable with, by myself in a stranger's house with this strange family members coming out, dozens of people coming out. Who are you?
Yeah.
But they were so used to that it was normalized for them. But sometimes when you had people that had never been on parole, they'd be like, why do you have to come over to my house? I don't understand any of this.
Yeah, I mean, and you seem like a really sweet guy, but you're huge.
Yeah. So just the fact that I'm coming in, and also I think I have resting bitch face, where people think that I'm upset a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so
part of your defense mechanisms for having to work in a prison.
Yeah, inside the entire time. And so going over to people's homes, I would try to be as respectful as possible, because I knew that I was coming into somebody's home that I'd never met them before.
So okay, again, I'm Canadian, so I'm learning here about the criminal law in the United States. So if you do a crime and you finish your jail time and you've been a good citizen in prison, then you have to come out and do parole with someone like yourself for 3 years. And during that 3 years, no law enforcement agent, including you, needs a warrant to search and seize anything that is your property.
Right, and that's why the police love to pull over parolees, because it's a point for them. It's a felony stop.
It's an easy win because you know they might have something.
All they have to say is, and these guys always answer, which amazes me too. But when the police pulled them over, are you on parole? Yeah. They don't have to really say that they are. And then they would search their car and they would find something, and that would be a hard part of my job too, because, like, for example, I had a guy that there was a taser in the glove box. Didn't necessarily mean that it was him because he had borrowed the car, but then he was trying to go to his mom had died. He's trying to go to her funeral, but now he's got this charge of a taser, and he's got to go back through the system again. And now he's pissed off at me because his mom passed away and he was in jail. He couldn't go to the funeral.
All right. Is having a taser illegal?
For a parolee, yeah. Yeah.
But not for a normal citizen.
Not for a normal citizen. And then there was all these, a lot of times the police would pull them over and there'd be a parole violation that wasn't, the police didn't really, like a knife. That's a big parole violation. You can't have a knife. But for the police, they'll put in their report. And, you would read these reports where, if I could get the report, by the way, because a lot of the police departments didn't want to help you out. But if you get the report, which is what I base my report on, you'd find all the, they had a gun or they had all these weapons and stuff like that. And the police wanted the specific crime and they just let them go. So very chaotic, a lot of paperwork. It wasn't just, the idea sounds like you're out there, hanging out with them and stuff like that. A lot of it is paperwork. You're in the office because they're constantly cycling in and out of jail and prison. But picking them up at the prison, that was another thing I had to do.
So 5 years working inside the maximum security prison and 22 years working as a parole officer outside of the prison.
18.
Okay. And I mean, during that time, did you ever witness anything that was like, okay, humanity is going to be okay? Like, did you ever have any like bright, happy?
Oh my God. I had this guy that, I used to visit him at a tent, and he was completely, for about 10 years, he had just been violating his parole in and out. And I don't know what it was. He kind of just snapped out of it one day, and went, and I took him to Veterans. Has got this huge campus on Wilshire. And if you're a veteran, then all these services are there.
Oh, I've seen it. They have like the temporary homes. They're in.
Yeah. But they have also nice homes that if people want to choose to do drugs, then they put them into those temporary homes.
Okay.
Because it's the ones that don't want to follow the rules. But they have a hospital right there and everything like that. And this guy went through their drug rehab program, got himself clean, got a job there. He still calls me and talks to him. But it's amazing to me and that was a guy that I saw in the prison also, that he went years. And just one day he decided, I don't want to do this anymore. A lot of it, I mean, was his age, the kind of age out of it. But he was the nicest guy in the world. And that was a guy where I was like, okay, well, that guy, it worked for that guy. And thank goodness it did, because he was just such a nice guy. And if you looked at, none of his crimes were violent or anything like that. So you really were rooting. I mean, I was rooting for these guys to do better. I certainly didn't want them to be on my caseload, because I had so many people on my caseload.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because like you want them to re-enter. I mean, the world is better, I think, if people are not incarcerated and not committing crimes and behaving as proper members of society, right? That's the ideal.
Yeah, I mean, look at everything that we deal with every day. I mean, I'm sure this is my thought process, is like the toxicity that I came from with family. And it's never talked about for those guys. And those guys came from the worst of the worst. I would meet their families and I'd be like, well, no wonder they went to prison, Just
to get away from their family, yeah.
But just like getting away from the narcissism and the beatings, and it's just such toxic environments, but they felt trapped, a lot like I did, where you don't know how to get out of those certain situations. But that's something that our society doesn't like, especially mental illness. Our society does very, very little, where they could easily have, especially for parole. If you know somebody that's identified as somebody mentally ill, you have a parole agent that's signing off on them. The most that I could do when they were having, psychotic or schizophrenia, 3 days. That was it. There's no facility where I can keep this guy because he's on parole. He needs to be in here. He needs to be in a confined place 24 hours a day. Nope. Now he has rights. Really? Because I thought he was on parole. Nope. He has rights for his mental illness, but because he was in prison, he has no rights. So
that's
rarely made sense at all.
Yeah.
But that was another thing. I was always in the different psych hospitals, in and out, picking them up.
Huh. I mean, and what percentage of these parolees that you were dealing with, who ended up probably going back to jail, what percentage of them like had real drug abuse problems?
I'd say a good 80%.
80%.
Yeah. And a lot of it is just, that's the environment. You know, you're getting high with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or same with, you know, there's such a high rate of spousal abuse, and it was because of drinking or alcohol or whatever. And it was just like, you know, you would go and arrest a guy, and the girlfriend would be right there saying, he's a good guy, don't arrest him. They'd be sticking up for him. They'd be mad at you about it. And he'd be like, sorry, I got to arrest you.
No. No worries. We're back.
Punch me for that.
It's okay. It's good to have a little break and reset. So 80% of the people that you would see cycle through your office had major drug abuse issues.
Yeah, and it was just, you know, and they would even tell you, like, what's the big deal? You know, the first thing that a lot of them would ask you is it okay if I smoke weed? And I would say, that's probably not the first question you should be asking your parole agent.
Yeah.
It was a way of life for a lot of guys.
Is it, I mean, now especially that it's legal, it definitely is. Is smoking weed as a parolee a violation?
Yeah.
So even though it's legal for everyone else?
Yeah, but anything can be a violation when they're on parole. So, you know, and it would also be this gray area of, you know, that guy's doing marijuana, so that guy's smoking weed, so he's probably up to no good. You know, it was always they're up to no good. And I was just like, really? Can we just leave this guy alone?
Most people who smoke weed just order a pizza and then go to sleep.
Right. But you just had this level, especially when it got higher supervisors, it was easier for the supervisors to kind of pick on that low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was easier for them to pick on the people that they worked with, because they knew if they picked on a parole agent rather than the criminal, they could get away with it. You know, they could discipline me for something that other guy did. So that was just the way that it was.
Sounds like it's just, I mean, it's like a 360-degree clusterfuck.
Yeah, it always was.
And how did you decide to get out?
Because I just was, you know, a few years ago, I just plotted to see, can I retire? Am I going to have enough money? And that was another thing, you know, like I started to call, because they'll audit you for about 3 years to find out your time and if you actually work that stuff. And I just was always writing down, okay, am I going to have enough money? And then when I went to retire, there's nobody there to help you. Nobody there.
No guidance.
They have those positions, but nobody's answering the phone or emailing you back. And then, you know, I go to headquarters to turn in my stuff, and I'm like, hey, I'm supposed to give you my car back. That's not my job. And so it's just everybody trying to not help you and not do your job. And then you finally hand in everything, and then you're just standing there. Nobody's like giving you a pat on the back.
No retirement party? Nothing.
And that's another thing that's, I think, very hard is, you know, they're just taking your badge and throwing it in a drawer. They don't, and you really do. You're like, okay, well, at least there's the proof that nobody cared.
Right.
You know,
because it's fuck you on day one and it's fuck you on your last day.
And they never cared. They'll always say that, we care about you 100%. And they never do.
But it's a union job, right? Like, shouldn't the union be like making sure their workers are happy? Like, isn't that part of it?
It is, but pretty much all the union does, you know, because the union collects so much money. I mean, millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And they'll, you know, like, they'll have like a little barbecue when they know nobody's going to show up, and it'll be like once every 10 years. And they'll be like, but we had a barbecue for you. And so
that's terrible.
It's politics.
Yeah.
And I learned that very easy on. Like when I would get stuck in places, like at the prison, I got stuck in a tower for 5 days straight because they hadn't covered behind you. Mm-hmm. And so I worked 16-hour days straight for a week. And, you know, I was told, well, you go put in, you know, a complaint about it. And that complaint went nowhere. Mm-hmm. And the union told me not to put in a complaint. And so the union is just on the side they were never on the side.
Just business as usual. Yeah.
And you learn that very easily. Oh, okay, it's politics. But you're taking my money every month. Yeah, but it's politics because your union dues are tied in with your insurance.
Well, there you go, right? Yeah, politics is money. Money is politics.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, everything just comes down to money, and people will smile and say that it doesn't, but it does.
Yeah, it's again, you've really stumped me here because the fact that you go to prison and then you come out and you're also basically not free, and you basically also have no rights, and correctional officers and police officers and whatever, and parole officers can search and seizure at any time and basically throw you back in jail for anything, and you don't even get the same rights as a regular citizen of California who wants to vote and smoke some weed. Like that makes no sense. Like you're getting
and none of it ever made any sense, and that's why I just gave up. Oh, okay. It just, you know, it depends on what side of politics that you're on, and you just go, oh, okay, this is how people are able to get away with stuff. You know?
But it seems like for you on your exit, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you plotted your exit and exited the way you wanted, I suppose, even though, no one gave a shit, but at least you got out.
Oh yeah, and everybody was telling me you'll never survive and you'll never do it, and everybody's against you and telling you, you can't do it because again, it's a cult, and so the people and it really took me about 3 months to realize how crazy that place was.
3 months of being out.
Yes, because you're just so all the time stressed out constantly. I mean, I was 30 pounds heavier. Never had time to. That's another thing is you're not allowed to exercise. You can't. You're supposed to be this healthy person, but they don't allow you to have time to go to the gym.
That's crazy because you should be fit and intimidating looking.
But even like, if you try to have a second job, they'll deny you to have a second job, even though they're not paying, because we're in, California. So a lot of people can't keep up. And a lot of people are divorced, shocker, and they're paying alimony and stuff and child support. And so they have to have second jobs and they'll deny you to have another job. And so it really isn't, when you look at it, it's not, you could be making money at other places and be a lot healthier. I just couldn't see it at the time. But I really do come to the conclusion that your health is much more important than the amount of money. And I would rather be living in a tent on Skid Row now than working in that place because it was so horrible.
That's wild. Did you not have to sign an NDA or anything to where you can't tell people like me everything that happened in the prisons? Or
be able to do this, and then all they would do is have internal affairs follow you around. They have a limited amount of resources and a limited amount of money, so they can do whatever you want. I would have people, when they found out that I did stand-up comedy, come to my office and threaten me.
Are you serious?
I just never talked about it. That's what you did. You just became very internal, and you just stopped talking to people. And you would, and people would be like, "Hey, isn't that guy great?" No, he's not a great person at all.
But you wrote a book about your experiences.
I did, yes. And I just never was able to talk about it or go and,
Mm-hmm. But you wrote it. Was writing it a problem? Were you intimidated at all in the writing of your book?
Yeah, and that's why I made it fiction. So I wouldn't have anybody that would come back and try to sue me or anything like that. But you just have a lot of people that they're suspicious of everybody, and again, because it's the cult in itself, So you have people that are constantly looking over their shoulder. They're constantly accusing you of something. You would have, supervisors that would come to you and accuse you of something and then walk away, and you'd be like, well, can't we still talk about the fact that you just accused me of something? No, it's over. And so there's this huge gray area of, I had my supervisor right before I left, went and told other supervisors that I was having a mental breakdown. And then we went in the conference room together, and they were all looking at me like I'm having a mental breakdown. And I'm like, why are we here? What's going on? It was all orchestrated by my supervisor just because he has the power to do it.
Just throw you under the bus.
Yeah. And then you try to convey that to other people, and they're like, just don't worry about it. It's squashed. Well, I'd like to talk about it because you just said I'm having a mental breakdown. So
yeah,
it's very bizarre. Is
talking openly like me are these people going to try to retaliate against you just having this conversation?
It's possible, but I would say more when you're working there.
Right.
It's very common especially at the prison, for them to come to your house and target your house,
As if you were on parole.
Yeah. That's many stories like that. But with parole, it was just, they would just call internal affairs and have them follow you around and intimidate you, show up at your house. Just because I don't work there anymore, I don't really feel that threatened.
How many years now have you been out?
1.
Oh, big up. Just 1 year. Jesus. Well, being out suits you. You look probably a lot better than you did back then. I can't imagine. You don't seem like a depressed person, or you don't seem like you're totally struggling.
I'm totally happy. And, you're carrying around 15 pounds of gear all day long, and, with a vest on. And so it's just exhausting to be there all the time. And everything is negative. No one is ever telling you you're doing a good job. Thanks for doing that. It's always, you didn't do enough.
Yeah.
You're doing horrible.
But you seem like someone who would be patting everyone else on the back and, giving people high fives for doing good things. That seems like your nature, just sitting across from you at this table today.
Well, I think leadership-wise, there is a big difference between bosses and leaders. And so that's how you get people to work with you, is to be good to them. But that is definitely a business where they don't really care, because you're not. That's the thing, is you're not creating anything. I really realized that on film sets, is everybody has a job to do. They want to do a job, and they want you to succeed. That wasn't the case in parole or the prison. Everybody did not care about you at all, and they could care less. If you just left the next, I don't care.
So the company doesn't care about its employees, and the company and the employees don't care about the inmates.
Yes, the inmates are they're last in line, and that's why the whole like when the governor changed, it used to be CDC and now it's CDCR, the rehabilitation. They spent like $10 million changing everybody's patches and stuff like that, but did nothing. They didn't do anything.
I got that money. I was in charge of relaminating all the patches. So thank you for that.
There is just another thing that shocks me is the amount of money that the state has through taxes and the amount of money that's just wasted all the time. Never ceases to.
Yeah. I mean, as we're gearing up for an election in November, like, do you think anyone's going to make incarceration, the incarcerated population of America, an election topic?
No, but I think that they should. And I mean, I look at kind of state laws all the time, and I haven't seen anything, but they could easily get rid of parole in a second, and that would save so much money.
I think if someone does the time, if you do the crime and you do the time, when you get out, you should be able to be normal again. Like that just seems like a no-brainer. I mean, yeah, maybe have someone meet them once every 6 months or something just to make sure they're not committing another crime or they're mentally okay. But that, like, having that constant, like, dark cloud over your head every day, like, I'm still not free. These people can come into my house at any time. Like, even smoking marijuana, which every single person does in Los Angeles, is a crime for me, but not for everyone else. Like, that just puts a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah. I mean, it does. And I just think everything, for the most part, is working against those guys, and I would like to see that change. I've heard them say we're going to do something, and they just never have. And again, I just got so frustrated with it, I left. Said they can have. I could, I even have like, people that I used to work with. Why aren't you at the range with us? Why don't you carry your gun around? I don't care about any of that stuff. So they can all have their crime and their guns and everything. I don't care anymore. I just want to be as far away from it as possible.
I wonder what the monetary value is. I'm sure I can look this up because it's probably public record somewhere, but I wonder what the monetary value is per inmate that the state of California pays to a prison company. And then I wonder what the monetary value is for that mandatory 3-year parole. I wonder what that's like. Because it seems to me like just, like, I don't know, I like business, right? So if you're thinking about running a business and someone comes into your prison for 5 years, okay, that's great. You get them for 5 years. You make money on some person's life for 5 years, as crazy as that sounds. But then it's like, well, how do we get a couple more years out of that? Because 5 is not enough. Okay, now we get this guy for 8. 5 in, 3 out, and it's a line item, right? It's more revenue coming through the door. Like, I guess that's why they don't get rid of parole, because it sounds like it's not that helpful, or at least, speaking to you, you probably found it wasn't the greatest system, and you just told me it could be scrapped and you would lose nothing. So it has to be because, that prison company is getting money from the state to manage that parole.
Yeah, I mean, when I've started, they had privatizing was just a big threat to the union. So what did California do? They just started sending their inmates privatized to Arizona, and that's what they do. And you just never really hear about that. But it still goes on, and it is way cheaper because the state has all their different regulations that they have to do. But it's probably 3 times more to incarcerate somebody through the state than through privatize. And the privatize, which was it used to be Whack and Hut was big. They just got mad that they were publicly traded and making money, but they did far cheaper and far better, and the institutions looked so much nicer and so much cleaner. And I personally thought they did a great job, but it was just politics. It was somebody came along and didn't like that they were making money and squashed it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And did you, when you were thinking about coming into this career, did you understand the difference between the state-run institutions and the privately run institutions? You just wanted a job.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. And I had no idea the amount of waste. It's like because again, it's like if they're charging for certain items, because when you're in the prison, you got to, you have to have medical, you got to feed these guys, it's a city in itself. So then you got to have, like, the idea of, that it's just the prisoners and the officers there. Well, there's all these people that are coming through the back with all these truckloads full of stuff because you got to
And the support staff.
Yeah, and you got to clothe them, and you know there's people painting, whatever it is. So there's constantly going on, and that stuff needs to be bought and sold. So you really do see like when I was first there, thinking, oh well, I need some sponges, so I'll go to the back of the prison to go get the sponges. Well, the guy in charge of that didn't want to give me the sponges; he wanted to save the sponges, and I'm like, but it's for the inmates. And so you see all this stuff going, getting taken, and away from the inmates, like with food was a big thing. Like if you passed out the lunches, you kind of realized real quick, if you had to give 100 lunches, you better ask for 120, because on the way from the chow hall over to the housing unit, 20 of them were going to be gone because everything's just pilfered.
Yeah, well, one has to assume that there's enough food to go around. So is someone just like selling that food?
Oh yeah, and it's bought in bulk, and so there's contracts, and people want those contracts. They want air conditioning contracts, or they want cement contracts, because construction contracts, whatever it is. It's a lucrative thing to get because the state doesn't care how much money that they're spending. They can care less.
That's so fucked up.
Yeah.
Okay, and did you want to show me your book or talk about that?
Sure. My book is Straight Fish. And straight fish is when you're brand new as an officer. It's a derogatory term that they call you straight fish. So it's not a nice person to be called.
And when did you write that book?
I think it's been about 10 years now.
10 years in the making?
And it was just great therapy. I think it was published 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So you published it while you were still working with them?
While I was a parole agent, I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I was also kind of thinking, like, if this does well, I can get out of there, and that's not the fact when you write a book. Because nobody reads it anymore.
Yeah, very rarely. We got to turn it into a screenplay. We're in the right town for that. Yeah. Okay, Straight Fish is your book, and you wrote it as a fiction, but it's based on your experience as a parole officer.
So many stories in there, and again, I just don't want to get sued by somebody, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Very nice, very nice. So, like, after coming through that hell, you seem like a pretty cheerful guy these days. What have you been doing the last year, and how has that kind of changed your life and helped you rehabilitate?
I've been acting, which I always wanted to do, and so it's just made me realize that's all about failure and auditioning. I've auditioned for probably over 1,000, and I've only gotten 13, but I think that's good, so it's a numbers game.
Mm-hmm.
And I would much rather be doing that than anything in law enforcement. I've been doing stand-up comedy and working on an art show, so pretty much anything in the arts, which I could never do before. I was always looked down on to do. So all the stuff that I always wanted to do doesn't really pay a lot of money, but I got a film tomorrow. I'm going to be a priest. That was always on my bucket list, to play a priest.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So,
That's it's funny that I mean, when you think of the two careers side by side, nothing could be more, black and white than being a correctional officer in a prison and being a parole officer, and then being so enthralled with the world of art, like in the world of communication, in the world of storytelling, which now you're kind of in, and that transition is hugely interesting to me, because you've come from such a dark place, and you're trying to build out a new career and also fix yourself at the same time. It must be a really big challenge.
Yeah, I'm definitely running towards the fear. And I think before I was running away from the fear of it. And I just realized, like, if you want to accomplish anything, you've got to go straight for it. And I've succeeded far more than I thought. I mean, in a year ago, I was just like, okay, well, I want to try to get at least one job. And I've gotten 13 jobs. And, I just wanted to be on a set and understand what they're doing. So I'm learning far more than I ever would before. My intention was always to be there, and as I got older, I was like, running out of time with age, so might as well do it now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was huge mentally for me to leave to do what I'm doing now. But it worked out great, and you hear people that want to come to LA and do their dream, do it, and don't listen to anybody else. And that's what I tell people, because everybody told me not to do it, and I think, and it's fear. It's people telling you not to do it because they're too afraid to do it themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's fear and envy, right? Like, I feel like, so everyone I have on the podcast, I mean, you're local almost, like, you grew up quite close by. So
yeah.
It's funny, but like the majority of I would say like 99% of the people who sit where you're sitting were not born in California.
Oh, yeah.
So they've all got a story about how they graduated high school or they graduated university, and then they got in the car and then they drove to LA and they drove down Sunset and they saw the billboards and they're like, this is my life now, right? But then they struggle or they make it or they don't, and everyone has their own story. But you've come through like just 2 decades worth of just shit.
I know. I get this. So I worked on a film a few weeks ago where everybody was from like France, the Netherlands, from other countries, and they were like, "So you grew up in LA, and you're just starting right now?" So it was crazy that grew up here and not tried to do it. 20 years ago.
I mean, you said something earlier. You said like even though you were being paid pretty well and you couldn't find comparable jobs at that pay level in society that some of your friends might have had and things like that. So at that time you thought like, okay, well, I'll just stick with it because I'm making great money. That's kind of what you explained to me, right?
Yeah, I did. There were other factors with my family. My daughter got really sick, and so about 15 years was just concentrating on my daughter. So I didn't have really time to do any of that. But there were times where I would go get headshots, and then I really realized like there were so many more responsibilities that came with parole. It really was like, oh, you're working hard. Well, here's some more work, and it really became like I was quietly quitting because I didn't want to be there. And the better that you were at the job, the more work that they would give you. And no, they wouldn't give you more money. They wouldn't give you more overtime. So you really just stopped trying to care at all. And so you really do, if you're going to be, especially an actor, you've got to be on call 24 hours a day.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Just like right now, I'm waiting for the call sheet to when I'm supposed to be there tomorrow. I don't know when it is, but they'll call you up and say, hey, can you be on set tomorrow? You can't have a job. And that's what I realized many years ago when I was trying to do it again was you can't have a job if this is the job you're going to do. So you might as well, if that's your dream to do that, you might as well, do it 100%.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think if you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the acting world, that 1 foot out is going to be the one that hurts you because it's just because you're not available when people need you.
Yeah. And on the other hand, I see a lot of people just giving up.
Yeah.
I've known a lot of people that have come to LA and said, this isn't for me. I'm just going to go home. So it is interesting for me, especially being older, to see younger people coming in and what they're expecting to get out of this, and it just comes down to you putting in the work to do it.
Yeah. So I was on the way to a point there. You were looking around at other people and your friends, and they weren't making as much as you were, so you decided to stick with it. You mentioned your daughter was ill, and I guess you had good health care with them, so that was another reason why too. But looking back, I'm guessing at this stage in your life, like you've built up at least maybe some financial security by having that job that you didn't like, and now that maybe that financial security does offer you a bit of a cushion to try your hand at acting.
Yeah.
So in some ways that might have been a little bit helpful, but it also sounds too like that was also crushing your soul and maybe wasn't even worth that.
Yeah, and again, it was mental for me because I can remember I got a job when I was 20 for PBS, a PBS special, and I didn't even show up. So the way that I view things are completely different. I really viewed it when I was younger as in, well, I'm just going to do this job and get paid millions of dollars, and if you want to do acting, it's do it for free, do whatever you can to if that's what you love to do, take whatever you can. But I was really picky and choosy, and that's a lot of it. I just wasn't into doing it where I am now.
No, and I mean, now it almost seems like the acting is part of your rehabilitation. If you don't, if you don't mind me making that leap,
great.
Yeah.
Well, and it really is the only, like, it scares me to death. I went. Tomorrow will actually be the first time where I have lines from a script because everything else has been improv. So I was always afraid of improv, so I started doing improv. I went to clown school because I was always afraid of stuff. But really, what it is being silent and listening and being in the moment. Because I had so much anxiety and depression and fear of everything because of where I came from, and if you can be present, especially when you're in a film, you're going to be okay.
That's wild. I've never heard of anyone making the transition that you've made. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to meet you and chat with you and just hearing what life was like before. and seeing you now and talking about, like, seeing your face light up and having you talk about, you know, your role that you have tomorrow, like, you know, it's like you've come out the other side and you've got, you didn't completely destroy you.
Yeah. And, you know, when I say for 20 something years, I had no emotions, I mean, I really had no emotions at all. And I see that with coworkers that I run into once.
And it's tough to be an actor if you don't have any emotions.
Yeah. Very tough.
But on the darker side, you also mentioned that some of your colleagues that had worked with you over various periods had killed themselves when they had retired or while they were still working.
When they had retired.
And what do you think that psychology was? Because I feel like when you stopped working, you had the chance to explore this second career that was your real passion, not being a correctional facility, you know, officer. Like, now you're really living.
Yeah, I agree.
And
yeah.
but your other coworkers, when they had retired, it had left them lost in a way that they wanted to take their own lives. Like, can you walk me through that?
Sure. You're given so much power that when you no longer work there, you're not telling people what to do anymore. Nobody's listening to you. So now you're at home, you're by yourself. Maybe maybe you have a wife or a husband, but they are listening to you either. And so you have all these years of all this stuff that went on that nobody understands and nobody cares about. And you have to come to grips with the fact that, it's you. And so those people that I've known, they didn't know how to deal with that. And I see that also with people that are still working. They can't stop being, it's like, I can stop being in law enforcement. I see crimes going on all the time. Okay, well, that's for the cops. It's not for me. And that's the difference, is they had so much power and they don't know what to do with themselves now. I still have friends that call me and say, hey, I can get you a job working security. No, I don't want to work security. So it's very tunnel vision. They are all doing the same things in retirement because they don't know any better.
Yeah. It's interesting. You know, I think so I've seen this a lot also too in combat veterans. So they would have this really important job, you know, overseas, keeping people safe, maybe working with locals, obviously, the base and your other soldiers, you know, keeping them safe, and having these like super important jobs that you know is life or death, and they're under so much stress, and they're being shot at and all this stuff, and then they come back to life here, and you know, in normal society, and people don't respect them, and you know, there's no voice for them, and there's no you know, honor and duty or anything like that they can find in normal life that they had when they were in Iraq or Afghanistan, and that just leaves them feeling completely hollow and purposeless.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. And I would also see, a lot of people that I worked with were in the military, they were ex-military, and they would, for many years, you know, why don't we do things like the military? And it was very hard for them to also realize you're in an even worse place now.
Well, yeah, because the military is no perfectly run organization either. Like, I've heard horror stories about,
And they would pretty much do the same thing. The smart ones would kind of go into special units and specialized places. But there would be the bulk of it, just like in the prison system, is the bulk of the job is for people that they're just not, it's not a thinking job.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, how, if you don't mind me asking, like, how negative an effect did your job have on your family life?
Totally negative. And we just wouldn't talk. Maybe my wife was embarrassed about it. Granted, she should be. But like, one of the things that I always thought was funny is my mom would not tell anybody what I did. She would tell people that I worked at the mall, that I was the security at the mall, because it was so hard in her mom mind to convey that her kid worked in this horrible prison.
Right.
And so my parents just simply never asked questions or talked about it.
I think though, but you know, beyond just having that title next to your name, like, you know, prison officer, correctional officer, parole officer, like, to me, there's no stigma to that, right? But I just feel like the way you've described it, of just having no emotion and having to be so cold and this like outer shell, you know, that you to just deflect all the bullshit. Like, what's that like, coming home to a wife and a daughter and sitting at a dinner table? Like that blows my mind, because it's got to be really hard to flip on and flip off.
Yeah, it was. I just think for me, I used humor to deflect.
Yeah.
So I would get more at home, like, stop being so funny, or not that it was funny, but I was trying to use sarcasm to diffuse the situation. And I just think that was my character, was always to find the humor in things. And I think that what helped me survive was I knew that it was screwed up, but I still had to deal with it anyways.
So the humor kind of got you through it.
I think so. Yeah. Because I could always joke around with other people, and you kind of gravitate to the other people that joked around with you, and because there was humor all the time. It's just that you were in kind of a dead zone.
Dead zone. Yeah. And I mean, can you describe this like rebirth that you're feeling now? Like, you've been a year out. I mean, it's like, I mean, it must just be like the air smells fresher, the grass is greener, like everything has texture to it again, like it's no longer like that dull gray life that you were in. Like now you're out and dealing with people who don't even understand that system that you were stuck in for so many years.
Yeah, my main goal was always that my daughter would be healthy, and I really, to me, that was like the big blessing, was she's good, and that's all that I care about. And I think that especially in life, if you can humble yourself and not have expectations for other people, and really go into every situation. I'm not expecting anything, and I think that's how people get caught up, expecting too much out of other people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and expecting like there's somebody, and especially with social media, people thinking like there's somebody, and if you just, I try to usually navigate around. If I see a large crowd, it's navigating around the crowd. It is just, I'm not worried about what other stuff is going on, not worried about gossip, stuff like that. It just makes it easier.
Yeah, just stay in your lane and use humor to deflect.
Yeah.
I mean, and what's your routine like these days? Because I guess your routine would have been pretty cemented for 2 decades. Like, what do you do every day now that you're kind of free from those chains, from those shackles?
The number one thing I can do is sleep, because I would always have my boss calling me and waking me up in the middle of the night and yelling at me. So I can sleep. I don't have to answer phone calls. I don't have to answer the door. I don't have to answer to anybody.
Thank you for replying to my emails, though, when we were setting this whole thing up. I appreciate it. Thank you for that. But I'm just wondering, like, do you take pleasure now in like little things, like walking through the park, or walking your dog, or
all the I mean, that's why I try to. I took tap dancing classes. I'm going to take fencing classes. I wanted all the things that I could not do before because I had no time to do it. Those are things that I wanted. I don't want to become a professional at it. Those are things that I've wanted to do that I can do now, and it's kind of like when you see somebody, I drop my kid off at school and we see people walking their dogs, and I would think that's what I want to be doing, because you just get caught up in this rat race of stuff, and you're consuming stuff, because you're just trying to not think about the stuff that's in front of you.
How did you not bring that negativity home, though? Like, because I don't know, I guess I like to think stuff rolls off my back, but I think I hold on to quite a lot. Like, and the more you see, the more it affects me. And I maybe have a difficult time like processing, but being surrounded by that much negativity on a daily basis. I mean, how did you not bring that home? Like, it's got to be more than just making, a few lighthearted jokes every now and then.
I would categorize, like, how do I would always remember the people that did me wrong. And I would have a list of those people, and I've never forgotten them, because I think a lot of times
I've got a hit list too.
Yeah.
I've got
people. I don't want to do anything to them, but if they ever came up to me, a lot of people at my job would burn you and then come up and smile at you. Well, what's wrong? Yeah. So I would hold grudges against those people, which I think is totally healthy. And that would kind of get me through, knowing that at least I knew, like, I'm going to be away from there. They're always going to be stuck in that mind frame and in that job. And really what it is, and you would see that when they retired too, some of them, they didn't know what to do because they never thought they were going to retire. It just kind of snuck up on them. And so knowing that I don't have to go back there is what makes me extremely happy, and I don't have to answer the phone. I mean, they were calling me, weeks afterwards to ask me questions about stuff at the work. I didn't have to answer the phone. I never did, because they don't own me anymore. So it's very freeing when you're not there anymore. So that's what I look forward to. And, looking forward to planting when it stops raining here in LA, but looking forward to planting plants in the backyard,
Yeah.
Which I never had time to do before because I didn't have time to water them. And all that sound, and I realize all that sounds very boring to people, and especially to law enforcement. It sounds extremely boring.
But it's the little things. Yeah,
it really is. And those are the things that I totally enjoy doing now.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever had to go, I mean, have you ever done therapy? I mean, have you ever talked through like some of the trauma that you've had to endure over those 2 decades? Or are you using stand-up comedy to get that out?
Stand-up comedy is great. I mean, it writes itself, so it's great therapy. The problem with that job is if it's ever written down that you had therapy, you can't lateral to other jobs because now you're labeled somebody that has mental problems.
Everyone has mental problems, though. I mean, this is my therapy. Like
Look at, it's like I tell people, I mean, look at what you have to go through to get that specific job for the amount of money that you get paid is ridiculous because there's other jobs that pay much more that you don't have to go through all that stuff. And then it always stays with you because when there were layoffs and I was looking at trying to go get other jobs, I can't say that I went to therapy. Can't be truthful that I was just trying to better myself.
Working in a prison, though, that would be like the ultimate. Like, of course you need therapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nope. And unfortunately, that's the way that they view things.
Your supervisors need therapy. The inmates need therapy.
Definitely need therapists. Yeah. Oh, I mean, my supervisor shot an unarmed parolee, and they promoted him. And he's the craziest person I've ever met in my entire life. Like, absolutely mentally ill, and everybody praises him because he's a man. So it's very bizarre.
That's fucked up.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. I mean, do you have anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to unearth to the audience here today, or you feeling like
I don't want to say
we went pretty deep. And do you have anything you're working on over the next few months or for the rest of this year that you'd like to share with the audience? I mean, people might listen to this and want to reach out to you or want to find your book, or do you have like a website or
website? It's MikeKnox.com. Also on Mike Knox Comedy on any platform. I'm always on TikTok, especially. All the kids are on there.
Yeah.
TikToks, Instagram, which tries to ban me for having too many emojis, but I'm on there also.
Well, TikTok's going to get banned, isn't it? Eventually, they're running this.
It just comes down to, I think there's a war going on between Amazon.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. Well, look, that was intense. I mean, you've been through some
I need therapy.
Yeah. I mean, we all do. I think
so. I think we'd be better if we all had therapy.
Yeah. I feel like so much of society is rigged against us.
Yeah.
And then I also feel like specifically the world that you lived in is probably one of the darkest places ever to come out of. Like for you to have come out of.
Yeah, I agree. Just because you're not allowed to talk about it. I mean, I'm sure somebody will, text me to tell me I'm a monster for talking to you.
Oh, really? You think it'll be like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're never happy when I talk about it. Yeah.
Oh, well, this might be a controversial episode to put out into the world. It's needed.
Well, I think that's the only way that things change when you bring up the fact that everything's falling apart. Why don't we change things?
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to, come back and we could go deeper into what you think needs to be changed and stuff like that. Yeah. Because I'm a big believer, like having the world's largest incarcerated population is probably not the right way to do things. So things would definitely have to change. And your insider perspective we could go way, way deeper on that.
Oh yeah, because when they do try to change things, they never ask parole. Hey, what should we do to change these things? Well, why wouldn't you ask parole if you're dealing with the inmate population?
Yeah, because you're dealing with the people once they come out, and once they come out, they should be able to jump back into society and be normal people again. And if they're not being able to do that, then something's wrong, and you're the right person to speak to.
Yeah, no, they never did. Same with when building the prison, they would never come to the staff and say, hey, how should we build this? It was always about how can we get the cheapest contractors to come in and build this. So
that's at the end of the day, it's a business, right?
Yep. Everything is.
Yeah. Not easy, man. Well, look, I really appreciate you coming by today and sharing all that with me. And I'm so glad that you're out of that place and onto greener pastures. And you seem like you're really happy doing the work you're doing. And I wish you all the best of luck tomorrow on set.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And now we can go to this one and shake it out. Wonderful to meet you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're out.